Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ross, and with me tonight, my host is Amanda Quick. Is that correct? Amanda Quick?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. All right, Amanda. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for taking some time out to chop it up with me and tell me about your life, what you went through and what you're doing for yourself now. All right.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Uh, Before we get started, though, Amanda, I just want you to tell everybody what it is that you do
Mhm.
and where you're from.
Yeah. So I am currently based in Central Oregon. I
Mhm.
spent 15 years in Colorado and originally from Hawaii, so all over the place. I am an author, I'm a TEDx speaker, and truly what I do is help people who've been through the worst of the worst feel seen and safe and kind of unpack the
Mm,
horrific things that we've gone through. I speak on the healing power of storytelling. That's my TEDx talk, and
mm,
really the lessons that I've learned after coming out of really challenging experiences as
mm.
I wrote them out and spoke them out, how much I realized there was healing within not just for me, but for others, the more I shared.
Awesome. And talk about things that you've been through. I
Yes.
know during our initial conversation, you mentioned that you dealt with PTSD.
Yes.
I say dealt because it's in remission, or so to speak. I guess that's the best
Correct. I
word I
don't
can
have
use.
active PTSD anymore.
Not active. So talk about the events that led up to that PTSD
Yeah.
moment, please.
Yeah, so in 2016, I was a young full-time stay-at-home mom. I had three young children. My husband worked long hours. I thought I had a perfect life. All the boxes were checked.
Mm,
House, white picket fence, dog,
mhm,
kids,
mhm.
etc.
Right.
And one day my husband doesn't come home from work and I can't find him. And he's not in the hospitals. And my mind thinks he's dead in a ditch somewhere. Like this is not normal. And I eventually find him in jail, arrested for attempted human trafficking with a $250,000 bond.
Mm,
And so that was the beginning of the next 4 years of uncovering. And to this day, I still don't know all of the details, but to understand the person I was actually married to and what sort of danger myself and my children were actually in.
mm,
And it was not an easy process.
mhm,
I had a lot of childhood wounding about losing my father, and I desperately wanted to believe that there was another explanation. I did not want to think that the person I was married to was capable of essentially trying to purchase children for his own sexual purposes. I did not want to believe that. And so when he offered an alternative explanation, I desperately wanted to believe him because that meant so much about me. And
okay.
I carried a lot of shame for a long time talking about that because people are just appalled that I would ever support him after an arrest like that. But I think people don't realize how much we believe we know somebody and what that means about us and what that means about them. And so I did support him through the criminal proceedings. And in this country, an upper middle class white man does not go to prison for such crimes. And he received an offer, a plea deal of only probation, 4 years
Mm,
of probation, and that was it. Which we could go on a long rant about, I'm sure.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that is the reality of the world we live in. And in Colorado, you also retain your constitutional right to parent, which meant as soon as he pled guilty to trying to solicit minors for sex, he actually gained back his parenting rights and was able to have unrestricted access to our children. And so that set off the next phase of things because now it was how do we heal as a family? In my mind, I believed we were healing from infidelity because that's all he would admit to. He would admit to having a sex addiction with adults. And so there was this whole story about all of that. And, when you have three young kids and you're financially dependent on somebody, you try to make it work. You try
Mhm.
to figure out okay, they're a problem and they're admitting it, and we have to, go through that process. But I thought I was dealing with one thing, and I still wasn't willing to see the deviant darkness behind all of it because what that would mean and all of the things.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I realized I couldn't actually stay married to him because after the criminal proceedings were over, I started to, like, the emotions just kept coming and the memories kept coming, and I kept trying to shove them down and it wasn't working. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized I really couldn't stay married to him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I did not want to break the family up, because this was now my choice, right? So I'm taking all of the blame on myself that I'm choosing to break the family up. I'm the bad person because
Right.
he wants to stay. But I realize I can't. And, there's so many more components of, what's happening in my world. And I'm finding myself attracted to different people. I find myself sort of drinking, which is not something I'd previously been doing, because I'm trying to numb all of these feelings coming up out of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I got to the point where the only way I could be affectionate with my husband was after a half a bottle of wine. And so, that started that. And a couple months of that, and I go, I'm not okay. This is not okay. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
caught it. But there are a lot of people who, continue that path for a long time because they're trying to keep it together and they're still trying to numb all of these pieces. And so eventually, uh, we sort of start to separate, but, everything is, I want to stay in the house and I want to keep things normal for the kids. And he's trying to keep a hold, right, on me. And I start to realize that he's pretty damn manipulative, but, in my head, he's an asshole, right? That's my problem. And he's still a good dad, or he's still this. I'm still trying to hold on to this belief that my kids can have their father and can have some sense of normalcy, because that's what I didn't have growing up and really what I really wanted for them. And so I held on to that for a long time. And we eventually started the separation process, and we started to separate houses, and their behavior got worse and their behavior towards me got worse. And there's this concept called parental alienation, where one parent pits the other parent against the children. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
his conversation with them was, mom left us, mom's choosing this, right? So
Mm-hmm.
again, my
Mm-hmm.
fault for all of this, and
Yep.
absolving himself. He didn't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this other thing that a lot of time these people do. It's called false equivalence. So, I did one thing, and so now we're even. We're
Oh,
even. I
yeah.
dated one person and I was honest about it. So now we're even, right? So it's this game they play, because if you have any insecurities, they're going to push at them really
Mm-hmm.
hard. So you're going to feel bad, like maybe you did do something wrong.
Yeah.
And they use that, right? And so all of this mind games played out for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually the next, like, shoe drops, essentially, and I start hearing things from my children that has this underlying energy of sexual grooming behavior, and they start telling me about the games that they're playing, and they're like excited, but there's this really uncomfortable feeling in my body. And with the things that my son says, I like, what the hell did you just say? And I went, holy crap, wait a minute, this is the guy who just tried to purchase an 11 and 14-year-old, and I supported him through the criminal proceeding, and my kids are now exhibiting signs of being exposed to inappropriate images and videos and
Yeah.
the games that they're playing. And I'm like, how the heck? Except now I'm in a high conflict divorce. And
Mm-hmm.
in a high conflict divorce, I would be kidnapping if I didn't continue to hand my children over to their father. And calling
Despite the fact
CPS
that he was an asshole and a
doesn't
manipulative,
matter.
yeah,
Doesn't
the
matter.
rule of law.
It's the court statute says, and we had a temporary,
Mm-hmm.
agreement in place through the divorce. And
Yeah.
so I would be kidnapping and could literally be charged with kidnapping my children and lose access to them completely. I called Child Protective Services. They
Mm-hmm.
terrified my child, did nothing, right? Probation polygraphed him, didn't even ask him appropriate questions, and just cleared him. And so this is when I'm in active PTSD. This is when I'm having panic attacks. Every single text message, every single child exchange turns into like a hostage negotiation, because if there's anything we have to discuss, a kid activity, because while he could have access to them, he couldn't be around other children or their schools or anything like that. So I would have to take them. And so if that meant it cut into his parenting time, he would want to negotiate. And if I held my ground, he would lock them in the car until I was willing to negotiate. And so there was this type of like hostage, high conflict, and I'm like, I can't live like this. I
Hmm.
can't experience this level of anxiety every day, every interaction. And everything in me is like, my kids are in fucking danger. And
Right.
I'm having to pass them right. So this is when the PTSD diagnosis comes into play because this is my rock bottom, not the arrest. Like that, yeah, that carries a lot of shame and a lot of public scrutiny and a lot of
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah.
But my seeing my own children going down a path where they're very likely going to be abused and worse, feeling like I'm completely helpless to do anything about it. The system is not doing anything. Any of the protective systems are ignoring me. The guy's already a felony sex offender and it doesn't matter. That's my rock bottom moment right
Hmm.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have a full-time job. I have 3 children. I have all these other things that I'm also having to keep it together at the same time while in the midst of all of this.
Mm, 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 mm.
And so that's the worst few months of the entire time because I had hired everybody. I had done all the things and I still felt like the writing was on the wall. That this was gonna be our life. And the reality is so many people end up sharing custody with their abusers and their children's abusers because the system is not designed to protect us, period. The system
Mm.
is only punitive if you can prove it. That's it. It is only reactive to something that can be proven. There
But
is
could you
zero
prove it though?
protections.
But I'm sure you could prove it.
Yes and no, right? A child's talk about a game isn't necessarily proving that anything has happened yet. And the grooming behavior is a boundary moving thing, right? So the grooming behavior is like, we're just going to push the boundaries a little bit and get you
Yeah.
comfortable here. And then we're going to
Yeah.
move the line again,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Right.
like for instance, it is not inappropriate for a scared child in the middle of the night to climb into bed with mom and dad, right? That's not inappropriate. But it is inappropriate for an adult man to get into a child's bed in the middle of the night, right? So there's a line that gets pushed and moved, right?
Mm.
And there's the energy behind those things. And so nothing happened that's proofable yet. And so how bad does it have to get before anybody intervenes? This is why so many of these things not only go unreported, but nothing happens because there's no protections in place to see this is not okay. And his prior criminal conviction was irrelevant when it came to custody. Even though it says this is something he's capable of, it was actually irrelevant. I had to prove that my children were in danger by him today. Like that was what I ultimately had to prove in family court, which felt like I had to wait for them to be abused to prove it,
Yeah.
right? Like
I
that.
was. Yeah.
And
I
and
was going
that's
to say. Yeah.
everything in me is like, what,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, my story thankfully doesn't go down that path, but that's the PTSD component of the story because that's the very worst time and the mind spins that happen and the body fight or flight mode, and it took me a long time to come out of that, but the story thankfully takes a turn. And my therapist, so I'm in therapy, I'm doing EMDR, I'm trying to calm my nervous system, I'm doing everything I know to do to take care of myself. I'm a regular exercise routine, like I'm doing all the things, but the situation, you're still in the war zone essentially, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's still constant triggers coming at me. And so my regular
Mm.
therapist, she's trying to help because I've hired all the people and they're like, this is crazy. Like, I can't believe this is happening. And yet, their hands are tied or whatever. And she says to me, she says, have you ever thought about seeing a psychic? I was like, what? You want me to go to a fortune teller? She's gonna crazy lady, right?
Yeah.
That's my response. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. Nobody else can help me. The lawyers aren't helping me, right?
Yeah.
But screw it. I'll go see the lady.
All right. Pause on the psychic. We're going to get to that because I want to ask. You talked about how it affected you,
Yeah.
and you talked about how screwed up the system was
Yep.
in terms of protecting you and protecting the best interest of the children.
Correct.
It I'm just kind of flabbergasted by all of that. And
It
stay
is
with
unfortunately a all too common story. That
hear me
part.
and and not to go here, but just hear me out. You're in Colorado. Certain things can basically slide by.
Yes.
In Wisconsin, that shit ain't going. I don't care if you're white or black. That shit ain't flying, you know, and
You should look up the statistics at how many times they've done sting operations and what the final sentence is because they get pled out every time.
I'm tripping off of that.
They get pled out because they don't want to take these, they, for whatever reason, unless it's like Epstein high, you know, with people know and it's a bigger, national thing.
Right.
These sting operations, they generally try to plead them out and they try to get them in treatment because they have this belief that they can somehow help them in treatment and that there is a low chance of reoffending. I disagree, but that's the belief in many, especially at the state level. If it gets to the federal level, it gets very different. If they cross state lines, it's very different. But if it stays at the state level, 95% of the time or more, it's pled out and they have, and his lawyer actually said at most he will get 3 to 6 months at most.
Mm.
And instead they offered 0 jail time.
How did the
This
kid?
is the world we live in. This is literally the world we live in.
Okay. For those of you that are listening to my interview here, if you guys have any questions that you want to ask of Amanda, please do so. Let me ask this: how did the kids feel about the friction?
Yeah.
I'm sure they saw it.
They
I'm sure
saw it.
they see it.
They did saw it and they were little. So this is the thing, right? So this has been only a couple of years into all of this. So they're, 4 and 6 and 8. Like they're still young and they're very reactive. And so at their dad's house, he was very bribe focused. So, right, you don't whine, you get candy. You do what you're told, you get screen time. And so they would get hyped up on sugar and video games and perfectly behaved, and they would come to my house and they would go through withdrawals and they would act out and they would punch each other and hit each other and be so mad because of whatever he said. And so they were constantly back and forth and back and forth. And they would tell me things that their father had said and be so upset. And I would try to calmly explain. And, it was this huge emotional roller coaster for them. They, of course, wanted the family back together. What child doesn't want that, right? They don't want to be going back and forth. They hated, the game in the sense that was being played, but they also, wanted a relationship with both parents, as all children do, right?
Yeah.
And so they could get to the point of concept of mommy days and daddy days, but there was really a lot of yo-yoing of their emotions that happened. And I think a lot of times parents don't realize that the safer parent actually gets the brunt of that because the safer parent is the one that they can freely express with and they can have the big emotions with, and they're not going to be punished or withheld affection or treats or whatever it is for having those feelings. And so it means when they actually come to you, their behavior in a sense looks worse on the outside because they're exploding all over the place. And that was my experience. It was a constant fight. And I feel like I would have a couple days and they'd finally regulate and I'd send them back over. Like it was just this insanity that we were living in. And it was an 18-month long custody fight. It was not a short period of time either.
So how long did you deal with the PTSD before you said, enough is enough?
Yeah, so the PTSD, I don't know when the official diagnosis came in exactly, but it was right around the kid's disclosure time because that's when my nervous system really, like, I knew there was more going on. It wasn't just dealing with assholery, right? And that's when that's how it felt. Yes. I'm glad you appreciate that. But
I caught that.
I want to say a good year into the divorce process, I was at the point of the PTSD diagnosis because it's not overnight diagnosis, right? It has to be a continual pattern of behavior that goes on for a long enough period of time for you to have
Sure.
that diagnosis.
Sure.
And I had seen multiple different therapists with different specialties, especially about these type of issues. And so the PTSD diagnosis came from a specialist and not just a regular counselor.
Mhm.
And, my lawyers, in a sense, wanted to show it from a court, not in a like, something is wrong with me, but in a, I'm in therapy, I'm working on it, and I'm experiencing this response to his offense and this behavior as well to help the court understand the severity of the situation. And so it was like a year into the divorce process that I got the diagnosis, and then another 6 months or so until the divorce was final. And the other thing is the divorce was final right before the pandemic hit, like
Mhm.
2 weeks.
Mm.
And so I was in therapy for another like 6 to 9 months or so, kind of unpacking and unraveling. But so much changed after both the divorce was final and through the pandemic that the triggers were gone. And so I was able to start working on it without being constantly, in that war zone feeling. And, I remember driving around even after everything was over, and this hyper vigilant feeling of like, are we going to
Mm.
pass his car? Are we going to see him? And what's going to happen? And,
Mm.
my body couldn't, so I'm ordering, having groceries delivered because it's the pandemic and I can just do that. And, I'm trying to do those things, but recognizing that like I
Yeah.
can't stay in this town. I can't be here. I have to remove myself so that I can actually heal from this.
Mm-hmm.
And so a year after the divorce was over, I got permission to leave the state and we, moved. And, thankfully I've been able to unravel all of those triggers, but I also don't have to deal with the man anymore,
Indeed.
thankfully.
Indeed. Now, when you moved, was he in contact with the children? I mean, did he contribute
So
to
the
raising
story
the
has
kids?
the happy ending really is that he lost all decision making, and he was given one last chance to comply with the court's requirements, which included more testing, more disclosures, more access to me, more people in place to ensure that the kids would be safe. And he chose not to do a single thing that the court recommended, which meant that ultimately he chose to only be awarded supervised visitation because the court basically said, if you want time with the kids, these are the things you must do. If you don't do these things, you will only get supervised visitation. And so he didn't do anything on the list. He never filed certificate of compliance with the court. And in doing so, he also never set up supervised visitation. And the last time he attempted to contact us was April of 2020. And he has not had a phone call, a email, a support payment, nothing whatsoever since 2020. And he basically, once he lost control of the situation, he lost control of me, he
Mm.
lost control of using the kids to manipulate,
Mm-hmm.
he walked away.
Mm. He's been AWOL since.
Yeah, almost, it'll be 5 years in April.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. After all of that, after, crazy fighting and all of this, it was over. It was an amazing, wonderful, horrific, like all the things.
Mm. 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 Wow. So, okay, so you moved. Everything is
Yes.
good. You know, your PTSD symptoms are, decreasing.
Yep.
Everything is cool. What did you learn from that experience?
Oh my gosh, everything. I've learned and I continue to learn so much. Examining, first of all, what ended me up in that relationship in the first place and what kept me in that relationship has really been the last work I've done for the last 5 years, is to really deeply understand myself and my patterns and the why behind it, and the childhood wounding pieces that I knew I was carrying, yes, but also the choice not to see what was right in front of me, and the need to
Mm.
be validated by a partner was a big piece.
Mm.
I think as moms, especially, so many moms put our kids' needs above our own. We're like supposed to. That's what being a good mom is all about. And I
Mm.
realized that my belief that my kids needed a father meant I put that need above my own need to be in a safe relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to start understanding how to take care of me first so that I could be the best person I could be to take care of them. Right. So I had to start putting my needs, my not just, you know, physical needs, but my emotional needs and my mental health and all of that actually had to rise above, yes, my children need to be cared for, but I have to put effort towards taking care of me and understanding me as a priority. And so that's been a really big one that I think a lot of parents and moms especially relate to. But even beyond that, I really had to be willing to, in a sense, face my own shadows. We all have them. We all have darkness within us. We all have the thoughts that eat at us that we never want to say out loud. And those things I had to face. I had to really face every piece of shame that I felt from staying in that marriage, from trauma bonding in that marriage, to feeling like, this was all I was even worth and that I deserved that marriage. All of that I had to really learn and face within myself in order to understand what attracted me and what kept me there and what kept me, in a sense, blind to what was right in front of my face.
Mm.
And didn't allow me to step into a different place. I was terrified of being on my own. I didn't think I could financially support the kids. I didn't think I could logistically handle 3 kids on my own. They were young. There was, all of the stories that I held on to. I had to examine and understand that that's what was holding me back.
Mm.
And when I made the decision to change directions and I made the decision to get out of this, I actually had to make the decision to be accountable to myself. Because, when I went to go see the psychic, right? And, whether you believe in it or not, doesn't matter, because what she said to me is what I needed to hear in that moment.
Go for it.
She told me the reason you're here, the reason you're sitting in this chair, and
Mhm.
and she was talking about the past lives and she was talking about all the things, but this is the piece that matters. The reason you're sitting here is because you haven't made a choice. You haven't made a choice to be done with him in this lifetime or any other. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I've hired the
Mm.
people, I've done the things. And she says, no. And it was in this moment that I saw myself clearly for the first time in years, because
Mhm.
what she was saying was not untrue. There was a part of me still that wanted my marriage, that wanted my family, that wanted the life I believed I had. And there was a part of me that was holding on to some possibility that I was wrong about all of this. And I was still hoping that that person was there underneath all of this chaos. I was still, and the shame that I felt about even admitting that to myself was
Yeah.
unreal. Right.
Yeah.
And so she wasn't wrong. I did not choose. I was sitting there in complete indecision while I was hiring people and doing the things and experiencing all the physical symptoms, but I was not choosing. I was torn in myself. And because I wasn't choosing, I wasn't putting everything into this like I needed to. And
Mhm.
I looked at her and I said, okay, you're right. I'm done. And she says, you gotta mean it. You
Mhm.
gotta mean it.
Say it with your
And
chest, huh?
yes. And I stood up and I said, I'm done. And I am not joking. 6 weeks later was our final divorce hearing. And at 6 weeks is all it took to go from there's no way this is going to change and we're going to share custody and it's going to go down a bad path to being handed full decision making and on a path that he basically vanished. That was all it took once I made that decision. And I think that is really, really important for people to hear, that even in the middle of active PTSD, even in the middle of all of the triggers, I still had a choice. I still ultimately had a choice of what I was participating in and what I was not, and what I
Mhm.
was believing about myself and how I was operating and what I was believing about what was even possible to happen. I had to hold on to this belief that things were going to work out because I was going to make it happen. I wasn't going to give up. No stone left unturned. I was going to do everything I could do, and I couldn't
Mhm.
fail because I wouldn't stop. If it didn't happen in this court date, it was going to happen at the next one. I was going to keep going. I just became so sure that he was unwilling to change or get better, and that my role as a mom meant that I had to keep going. And I trusted that every single new piece of evidence was supporting that path. And so rather than freaking out about it, I would say, okay, this is what we need to happen. I'm calling the lawyers, I'm doing the things. We would file motions that didn't go anywhere. Something else needs to happen. I developed this blind faith that it was going to completely transform if I just trusted it and I kept going. And 6 weeks later, that is exactly what happened.
Mm, that's awesome. So did did this help spark your interest to writing your book?
Absolutely. Yes. Even in the middle of it all, it was like, this is
Mm,
crazier than, some
yeah. So this is some bullshit.
comedy or Lifetime movie thing, right? It's this, in the middle of it,
Yeah.
people are telling me this because every day there's some new drama happening. And so after it was all over, I, had this sense that there was a big story here, obviously, but I also had this understanding that I accomplished something that most people don't. Most people don't get to that point where they're faced with themselves and they understand the choice that has to be made. And even if they understand it, they're unwilling to face the shame and the darkness that that holds,
Mm,
and to then keep going. And not, this isn't a right or a wrong or a blame or a shame. This is just a reality of the world we live in, that so many
sure.
people end up in this place where they're constantly being triggered, and the PTSD goes on forever, and things just continue to get worse, and they feel completely helpless to do anything about it. And there are so many people who sit to a victim of their circumstances, and they sit in that reality without ever seeing a path through. It's, the forest through the trees kind of a thing.
Right.
And it was this awareness that I had unlocked something, this faith in myself that I had unlocked amidst the worst chaos, was a message that I had, and I had this like obligation to speak out into the world. And that the shock of his original arrest and the shock of the system was a big piece of it, but even more in that was my thought process the whole time, because I'm not the only person to be married to somebody who's committed atrocious crimes. I'm certainly not the only person related to people committing atrocious crimes, and I'm not the only person to stay in an unsafe relationship. Like, there are, unfortunately, millions of people out there in those situations. And so it was like this loud calling to speak my truth, to share the story, to help, and to use it to help other people. And in hindsight, I can see this whole journey, instead of this horrible thing that's happened to me, I actually see it today
Mm,
as a gift. It's a gift that I've been given to deeply understand these types of experiences from in a very intimate level, because
mm,
I can now hold people in understanding without judging them, and I can be a safe place for people to know that they're not alone, and that
mm,
there is something on the other side, and there is a path forward. It can be that in a different way. And it actually, to me, the amount of compassion I now can have for those other people,
mhm.
like, it's not about how strong I am. It's now actually how much empathy and compassion I can hold, that I really, that's that gift for me. And it helps me actually heal from the whole thing, because I can now use it to help somebody else. It's not just about me getting out.
Yeah.
I can be that kind of beacon of hope for other people. And like, I honestly probably wouldn't even trade it today, because I couldn't imagine not having this level of understanding for
Mm,
others that I do now.
mhm. What's the name of your book?
It is called The Sex Trafficker's Wife, a story of truth, faith, and trust in self.
The Sex Trafficker's Wife.
Yep.
All right.
You got to use the shock factor if you have it. I tell people I'm an author and they want to know the name of my book. Like, all right, here's the can of worms.
Have at it.
Yeah.
All right. So when did you do your text talk? TEDx
TED
talk.
Talk. Yeah, so I delivered that February of 2024. It just got published in August of last year. So that was another exciting moment. I wanted to take the story to the bigger stage. So I, people always ask me, like, how many did you have to apply for and all that? It was like two or three. I got it pretty quickly.
Mm,
I found an event that's theme was Phoenix Rising, and I knew that I could embody that for the event. And So the TED Talk is called The Healing Power of Storytelling, and I tell my story and, using my story, share how we can actually change the narrative that we're telling ourselves to heal and change the outcome of our lives.
Okay. Okay. Are you doing anything else to help other people, Amanda?
Yes, yes, I am. I also have my own podcast called Awakened Motherhood, and that podcast I invite other moms to share their big overcoming stories. I want to lift up more than my own. I've gone through a lot, and I find a lot of resonance with a lot of the guests that I have, and I think it's really amazing how, while not the same, but how similar the things that we go through and the things that we unravel together. So I share that as well. I also
Mhm.
I do accept coaching clients for the right person. If somebody really needs, sometimes I'm the person to help unpack some of this from them, because there are a lot of therapists who can't actually hold space for the dark, really dark things, and who get
Mm,
triggered themselves. And
mm,
I find that sometimes people just need somebody who's really been there. And I actually have people reach out to me all the time who
nice.
unfortunately find themselves in a relatable situation and just need somebody to hear them. And so I offer that for
Hmm.
people. My inboxes, I usually will respond to people. Just sometimes I just need a phone call. I also have a nonprofit that I'm working on getting off the ground. It's not fully launched yet, but my goal is to bridge the gap between, there is no current support for people who are fighting for custody from their abusers and the children's abusers. The financial burden is very high. And unfortunately, that makes it a privilege barrier for people to actually get the help they need. And my divorce was over $75,000, and my ex was a felony sex
Ooh,
offender. And
yikes.
most people don't have those resources. And so I realize that, and I want to do what I can to help people access those resources, as well as come to the place where they're emotionally and mentally in a position to actually have the fight. Because it wasn't the money that saved me. That's not actually what did it. But without the money, I wouldn't even begun to have the fight. And I needed to be both financially able and in the right state of mind to have this fight and to win.
Let me back up. You said something that really sparked, I'm not going to say it triggered me, but it gave me pause. You talked about how your ex-husband uh, is a convicted uh,
Offender, yes.
sex offender. Yes, but he was still able to see the
Yes.
kids.
Yeah, unrestricted access, because in Colorado there was a
What?
Supreme Court precedent. Yes, the constitutional right to parent, it's actually a constitutional right to familial association, means that a registered sex offender does not automatically lose their right to parent, which means all of their parenting rights are intact, which meant I had a full-blown 18-month-long $75,000 custody fight to prove that my children were in danger. That's the reality of the world we live in. And that's why I share my book and I speak loudly, because people have no idea.
Hmm.
And I cannot tell you how many women have come to me, and in some cases, one of their children is the direct victim, and their father, the abuser, still has rights to the other kids and still takes them to court and fights over it. This happens in this country, and this is not just in Colorado. This is all different
Yeah.
places. This
Mhm.
happens all the time. And, when they find me, I obviously will help and talk them through in the best way that I can. But it is
Yeah.
not just me. But I will tell you, I'm the only person to ever have written a book from the wife's perspective about this issue, because so many people sit in shame and judgment, and they don't come out of it in a way that they can speak about it. And so when I realized that I did,
Mm.
I felt like I have to do this. And not only is, there a book and a TED Talk, but in 2025, there will also be a documentary that I just recorded that will be out for the public to see as well. And I don't know when or which network it's on, because we're still in negotiations, but that's the next thing that happened. Because I want to spread as much awareness and exposure
Mhm.
as I possibly can.
Now, this documentary, this is your life.
Yes, it is. It's not this issue that I'm a part of. This is directly about me and my story.
Right.
Yes.
Wow. I would love to see that.
Yeah, no, when I have details, they recorded it right before the holidays.
I would
And
love to see that.
I know it's going to be an international collaboration, and I'm just waiting to hear what's next.
Keep me updated on that.
I will. I will. Yeah.
Uh, let, let, let's marinate on this because
I know. It's a lot.
it is, but it's sad as hell
I know.
that in many instances you have creeps and clowns that
Yes.
do horrible stuff,
Yes.
but they're still able to do it to their
Yes.
kids.
Correct. And manipulate, and
And,
that a child's right to safety is it doesn't matter because an adult's right to parent outweighs it.
mm, mm, mm.
Yes. I believe me, it makes me just as angry, but I've lived it. And people have no idea that this is happening. And trafficking in itself, and human trafficking, and the sex trade, and the way that this is happening in every single town and every single city. This is not a
Oh yeah.
foreign country problem.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
people are participating in it that you likely know. And
Milwaukee,
like
Wisconsin
that's
is a
yeah.
yeah.
And
Milwaukee,
every place I talk about, people are like, "Oh yeah, I've heard this is a hub." It's
yeah,
everywhere.
Milwaukee is a hub. Milwaukee is a hub
It's
for sure.
everywhere. And people are participating in it. And whether they think it's just, you know, prostitution, it's not.
It's deeper than that.
It is much deeper than that. And this is happening everywhere. And children are being involved. And then these guys are going home and parenting their kids.
Oh, goodness.
Yep. And it's insidious. It's in, it's creeped into every corner of the system. And this is part of why I'm not going to stop talking about it, because without awareness, people continue to stay blind to the reality.
Hmm. I have a question. Um,
Hmm.
in the chat, there's a question here. uh, the question is, are there a lot of Mormons in Colorado?
So I'm unaware specifically. I was in Durango, Colorado, which is the very southwest corner. It's a very small mountain town, not Mormon heavy. So I'm unsure specifically about the rest of the state. Uh, but you know, honestly, this happens in religious organizations. This happens outside of it. It's not unique to any one demographic.
Mhm. Okay. Mm. I'm still reeling over the the I'm still reeling over how deep the rabbit hole is
Yes.
in terms of how people can do things and get away with it. And I don't even want to make this into a racial conversation, but it's
There is a
just
component to it. There is. I mean, I want to own the privilege that I had to be able to have the fight, because it is relevant, and it's why I want to speak about it, because I can. But it there is, if I had been a Black woman in poverty, I wouldn't have stood a chance.
mm, no, no,
And
not at
I
all.
know that.
And it will make the news.
Correct.
First thing flying.
Correct.
Yeah. And here's a follow-up comment to the question.
Hmm.
The question, the comment says, it seems that Mormon communities are more lenient with
Mm-hmm.
these types of situations.
Hmm.
So she
It's very
wondered if
possible.
that was the case on this particular.
Yeah, it's very possible that, but that was not relevant, at least in my particular situation.
Okay. Okay.
That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Mormons are the original polyamorous.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So now that you moved on, are you remarried or single?
I actually was briefly, but that has now ended, and it was a healing relationship in a lot of ways. Emotionally aware person, but ultimately we just wanted different things out of life. And, I want to go do more advocacy and speak on more stages and do more things. And he wanted to settle down and have a quiet life. And, we ended very amicably, but
Nice.
no, not anymore.
Nice. Nice. Well, I mean, not nice, but I understand. So
Yes. Yes.
with all the stuff that you have going on, uh, do you have anything else going on?
Well, I also have a day job and I have my kids and I mean, I have
Wow.
more books in me. I have more books in me that I want to write. I would love to be able to speak on more stages. That is a dream of mine. And
Yeah, same
as
here.
travel allows, because the reality, I have a solo parent of three children and they're 9, 12, and 14 today. So they're older, but I don't have the ability to travel freely yet.
Mhm.
So I do what I can, remotely. And, I'm one of those crazy people that now thinks I can change the world because I have so much wisdom gained that I want to spread out. And just as you're doing this podcast to help other people share their stories, I want people to understand the power that their stories hold to help other people too. And, I want to go bigger with it.
Yeah, yeah.
As I can,
Yeah.
but being a mom comes first, of
Mhm.
course.
Mhm.
And, I kind of tried to balance, taking care of me and my dreams and making sure that they also are taken care of. And, they today understand a lot, in an age appropriate way. But as they've gotten older, we talked more about what happened and, placing blame where it's due. They, have had to deal with the loss of a father, which is another thing to go through. It's a different grieving process. Even when, it was his choice, it still was a loss to them. And, the younger two especially don't even hardly remember their father anymore. And it's not a daily conversation, but there
Mhm.
still are pieces, right? I'm still not, I have to be both mom and dad, which, I have boys. So it's its own challenge, but I'm not going to stop. I will continue to write books. I will continue to speak. I will continue to do what I can to help other people who are suffering themselves because nobody should ever feel like they need to be completely alone in the darkness. And my heart goes out to anybody who's in that place. And I think you probably relate as well. But when you're
Mhm.
in that deep, dark place and you think you're the only one there,
Mhm.
my goal is to really reach out and let you know that you're not alone and
Mhm.
that, I will get down and sit in there with you as long as you need, but there is a way out when you're ready.
That's only something that I would say because I say that. So we're here
Wow.
with that because
Yes.
I, I preach that. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this right now
Yeah, I understand. Yeah,
because
I think those of us who've been there get it in a way that those who haven't don't. And, it's not a club we chose to be a part of exactly,
yes,
but
we did.
once we're here,
Mhm.
the level of feeling of purpose and drive that we have from knowing we can help somebody else, really just keeps us going in a way that not a lot does.
Yeah. So if you could if you could say something to people out there in the diaspora to give them courage, to give them
Mhm.
hope,
Yeah.
uh, what would that message be?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I always want to remind people of is that they need to first trust themselves. They need to not the system, not the partner, not the friend, not the whoever. They need to really connect to this part of themselves that has had that gut feeling that they maybe haven't wanted to look at, but that they need to trust themselves first. And especially to the moms out there, you know your kids the best.
Mm-hmm.
And connecting to that, and trusting that you actually know how to get yourself out of here. But you have to be willing to face yourself in order to make sure that you can actually take the steps you need to take and find that willingness to be radically accountable, but radically honest with the deepest parts of ourselves. And then if you can do that, you can literally do anything. You can completely change your life. And alongside that, if I can do it, so can you. I'm not any special or any different. And if I can do it and I can come out of this and have a completely different life from the deepest, darkest places, so can you.
Awesome. I have one last comment here.
Of course.
uh, Thank you for your candor and transparency. As a DV survivor, I find it therapeutic to speak out about what I've been through. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
Mhm. What's your contact information so people can reach
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, people can reach out to me, Amanda at amandaquickhealing.com if they want to email me. I'm all over social media, Amanda Quick, or my website is amandaquickhealing.com.
Awesome. Amanda Quick, you said a lot.
Yes, sure did.
You said a lot, and I thank you for saying a lot, because these are the types of messages that people need to hear.
Agreed.
And
Thank
I
you.
wish nothing but the best and much success to you. And keep me, hey, I'm
I
already
will keep you updated. I
keep me
promise.
updated on this documentary now, because
I will. I will. It very likely could be on a Netflix type situation. That's
oh, absolutely.
yeah.
Oh man, just listening to you talk, it makes me want to get up and drive to Colorado and look for this dude. It's like, oh man, this dude needs to get his ass whooped.
Yeah, I have
He
absolved
needs his
myself. He's made his choices. I am
all
doing what
kinds
I can to change the world outside of that.
of. Well, I will once I post this onto my YouTube channel, I will uh put your information down.
Okay,
So
thank you.
if people want to reach out to you, ask
Of course.
questions and whatnot, they have that at their
Yeah.
availability. So,
Yep.
Amanda, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I really do appreciate this. And again, much success to you. I'm looking forward to seeing what's next. And yeah, you
Thank you
got
so
my
much.
email. Keep me.
Yes, I do.
So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mark Ross, and this has been another episode of the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross podcast. Remember, please make your mental and physical health a priority every day and do it first. With that being said, good night, everybody, and good night, Amanda. Take care.
Take care.
All right, bye.